The ocean was quiet. It had been quiet for a very long time. 3 miles beneath the surface of the Atlantic, deeper than most ships ever go, deeper than light ever reaches. There was nothing but cold, dark water and old, broken rock. No, fish lived down there. No currents moved. It was the kind of silence that felt permanent, the kind that made you think nothing had ever lived there, and nothing ever would. That silence had lasted for 8,000 years, and then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, it ended. The ship was called the Vareth Solin, a deep-sea research vessel operated by the Galactic Council's Survey Division. It was not a military ship. It was not an exciting ship. It was the kind of ship that spent its days mapping ocean floors on dead planets and logging the results in reports that almost nobody read. The crew of 11 had been stationed above the Atlantic for 6 weeks. They had found nothing interesting. They expected to find nothing interesting. They were 3 days away from going home. Then the alarm went off. It was not a loud alarm. It was a small, soft chime, the kind the monitoring system used when it detected minor geological movement. The kind that usually meant a rock slide somewhere deep underground. Navigator Pell was the first one to look at the screen. He assumed it was nothing. He looked anyway, because that was his job. He stared at the screen for a long time without saying anything. Then he called Commander Reth. Commander Sarah Reth was not a person who panicked easily. She had been leading survey missions for 22 years. She had seen strange things, ancient ruins, dead civilizations, ships that had been drifting in space for centuries. Strange things did not bother her. But when she walked onto the bridge and looked at the screen Pell was pointing at, something moved in her chest that she had not felt in a very long time. The alarm was not showing a rock slide. It was showing movement. Deep, deliberate, mechanical movement. 3 miles below, the ocean floor, in a location that had been completely still since the monitoring grid was first installed 400 years ago. She pulled up the location file immediately. It was almost entirely classified. Big red blocks covered most of the data. Locked, behind clearance levels she did not have and had never needed. But there was one small piece of text at the top of the file that was not classified. One line written in a language her system flagged as extinct. She ran it through the translator. The result came back in plain, simple words. It said, "Do not dig, do not knock, do not wake what waits below." Reth read it twice. Then she ordered, "The probe." The probe was small and fast, a standard survey unit, no bigger than a table. It dropped into the water and descended quickly, its lights cutting through the dark in thin white beams. The crew watched the feed on the main screen. For the first 2 minutes, there was nothing to see. Just rock. Just water. Just the endless, deep dark that covered the bottom of the world. Then the lights hit something metal. It was a door, not a small door, not a hatch. A door so large that the probe had to pull back 3 full lengths just to get it in frame. It was built into the rock like it had grown there. Smooth, dark metal covered in markings that the ship's system identified as old human military script. The surface of the door was dented and scarred in hundreds of places, like something had spent a very long time trying to break through it from the outside, like something had tried and tried and tried and had never once succeeded. The probe's camera moved slowly across the surface. Dr. Sael Vorn, the youngest member of the crew, an archaeologist who had spent his career studying dead human settlements, leaned forward so far in his chair that he nearly fell out of it. He had studied human ruins his entire career. He had walked through collapsed cities and empty bunkers and silent museums full of things that no living human had ever touched. He knew human military architecture better than almost anyone alive. He had never seen a door like this. He had never seen a door that was locked from the inside, because that was what the probe's sensor was showing. The locking mechanism. All 9 of them, each one the size of a small vehicle, were engaged from the interior. Whoever had sealed this door had sealed it from within. They had gone inside, pulled the lock shut behind them, and stayed there for 8,000 years. The camera zoomed in on the center panel of the door. There was a handprint there, a human handprint, pressed into the metal like a signature. 5. Fingers, worn smooth by time but still perfectly clear. The hand of the person who had locked themselves in. Vorn was still staring at it when the locks began to move. All 9 of them, turning slowly, one by one, from the inside. Nobody on the bridge spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound was the soft mechanical groan of ancient locks opening for the first time in 8,000 years, and beneath it, if you listened very carefully, something else. Something that sounded exactly like footsteps. He was awake, and he was walking toward the door. 8,000 years before that door opened, the world was on fire. Not the kind of fire that burns forests or destroys cities. The kind of fire that ends everything. The kind that does not leave anything behind to rebuild from. Humanity had been in a war for 11 years. A war they had not started, a war they had not wanted, and a war they were very clearly losing. The enemy was called the Vrath. They were not monsters. That would have been easier to understand. They were simply a very old, very powerful civilization that had decided the space humanity occupied was more useful without humanity in it. They did not hate humans. They did not fear them. They treated the war the way a person treats a slow, unpleasant task, something to be finished, cleaned up, and forgotten. One by one, they destroyed every human colony beyond Earth. 14 settlements, millions of people, gone in 11 years. By the time the Vrath fleet reached Earth's solar system, there was almost nothing left to fight with. The human government, what remained of it, met in an underground facility in what used to be called Ireland. There were 9 people in that room. 9 people making decisions for an entire species. They looked at the numbers. They looked at the maps. They looked at each other. And they understood, without saying it out loud, that Earth was going to fall. There was no stopping that. The fleet was gone. The colonies were gone. The war was lost. But there was one thing they could still do. Project Ironhold had been in development for 3 years. It was never meant to be used. It was a last resort, a plan so desperate that nobody wanted to be the one to authorize it. The idea was simple. Take humanity's 2 most powerful remaining warships, not to fight, but to dismantle. Use every part, every weapon, every engine to build something bigger, something that could not be beaten. A counterattack fleet, 200 warships armed with technology the Vrath had never seen, fueled and ready and waiting. Hide it somewhere the Vrath would never find it. Wait for the right moment, then strike back. The problem was the location. They needed somewhere the Vrath scanners could not reach. Somewhere deep, somewhere cold, somewhere that looked like absolutely nothing from the outside. After a long argument, they agreed. 3 miles beneath the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. A vault carved into the rock, shielded, sealed, invisible. The Vrath would never dig that deep into a planet they believed was already defeated. Project Ironhold would work, but only if someone stayed inside to maintain it. The machines could keep the ships operational. The systems could manage the power and the fuel. But machines made mistakes over long periods of time. Machines needed someone to catch those mistakes. Before they became failures, someone had to go inside the vault. Someone had to stay there, alone. For however long it took for humanity to come back, they called for volunteers. One person stepped forward before they finished the sentence. Sergeant Major Darren Cole was 38 years old. He was not the most decorated soldier in the room. He was not the most famous or the most experienced, but he was the one who stepped forward, and when the people in that underground room asked him if he understood what he was agreeing to, he said yes in the way that people say yes when they have already decided and do not need to think about it anymore. He was given 3 days. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to say whatever he needed to say to whoever he needed to say it to. The records do not show how he spent those 3 days. There are no letters he wrote, no messages he recorded, no final words preserved in any database. Whatever he did in those 72 hours, he kept it to himself. On the morning of the 3rd day, he showed up at the vault entrance with a single bag. The lead engineer, a woman named Dr. Hesse Kaur, walked him through the systems one final time. She showed him the maintenance schedules, the sleep protocols, the communication array that would let him hear any human signal that came within range. She explained the minimal mode, a deep, slow state the machines could hold him in, where his body barely aged and time moved strangely, like a dream you cannot quite remember when you wake up. She told him it would not be long, a few months, a year at most. Humanity was already planning the counterattack. He just needed to hold the fleet until they were ready. Cole listened to everything she said. Then he picked up his bag, walked through the vault door, and turned around. Dr. Core was standing in the entrance, holding a tablet, looking at him with an expression she was trying very hard to keep neutral. He could tell she did not believe her own timeline. He could tell she was trying not to show it. He nodded at her once. She nodded back. The door closed. The 9 locks engaged. One after another, each one sealing with a sound like a final word in a conversation that was over. Cole stood in the silence of the vault and listened until the last one clicked shut. Then he turned around, looked at 200 warships sitting in the dark, and got to work. 3 days later, Earth fell. Nobody sent a message to tell him. The communication array picked up the last human emergency broadcast. 40 seconds of static and a single repeating word. Evacuate. And then nothing. Just silence. The same silence the ocean had always known. Cole sat at his terminal and stared at the dead signal for a very long time. Then he opened his log, typed the date, and wrote his first entry. Day 4. No contact from command. Maintaining systems. Everything operational. Cole out. He did not write what he was thinking. He never did, in any of the entries that followed. But anyone who has ever waited for something that never came, anyone who has ever sat in a quiet room listening to a silence that keeps getting louder, would have understood exactly what was behind those 4 words. He knew. He had known since the door closed. Nobody was coming. But his orders were his orders. And Darren Cole had never once in his life left a post before he was relieved. He was not going to start now. Deep above him, the ocean covered everything in darkness, and the world moved on without him. Most people, when they think about being alone, think about a few days, maybe a week, maybe a long winter somewhere cold and quiet. They think about how uncomfortable that would feel. No one to talk to, no noise, no company. They think that is what alone means. They are wrong. Alone is not a few days. Alone is not a long winter. Alone is what happens after the first 100 years pass and you realize the silence has stopped feeling strange. It just feels normal now. Alone is what happens when you stop listening for footsteps that are never going to come. When you stop checking the communication array every hour and start checking it once a week instead. When the date on the terminal becomes just a number, something you update out of habit, not because it means anything anymore. Darren Cole learned what alone really meant very slowly, the way you learn something that nobody can teach you. One day at a time. For 8,000 years, the first year was the hardest. He kept his routine tight because tight routines kept him sane. Every morning, or what the vault's internal clock called morning, he woke up, ate a ration, ran a full diagnostic on. All 200 ships logged the results and sent a report into the dead communication array. He ran physical drills in the corridors between the ship bays. He read every technical manual in the vault's database. He memorized things he already knew just to give his mind something to hold on to. At night, he lay on his cot in the small corner of the vault he had made his own and listened to the hum of the machines. It was a deep, steady sound like breathing. He found it helped. It meant something was still running. Something was still working. The world had not completely stopped. He did not let himself think too far ahead. One day, then the next, then the one after that. That was the only way through. By the end of the first year, he had sent 365 reports into the silence. Not one response had come back. He sent the 366th anyway. By year 50, his handwriting had changed. He noticed it one afternoon when he flipped back through the paper log he had been keeping alongside the digital one. The early entries were neat and controlled, military precise. The later ones were looser, slower, like the hand that wrote. Them had stopped being in a hurry. He was not in a hurry anymore. There was nowhere to be in a hurry about. He had stopped sending daily reports somewhere around year 30 and moved to weekly ones. Not because he had given up. Because it was a more reasonable schedule for a long assignment. That was what he told himself. That it was a scheduling decision. He was good at telling himself reasonable things. By year 100, he switched to monthly reports. By year 200, he accepted, quietly, with no drama and no breakdown, that no one was ever going to answer. He did not stop sending the reports, he just stopped expecting anything back. There is a difference between those two things, and Cole understood it better than most people ever would. He kept sending them because they were part of the log, and the log was part of the job. The sleep cycle started in year 300. The Vault's systems had always offered them, long rest periods where the machine slowed his body down to almost nothing, heart rate at 4 beats per minute, temperature low, brain activity minimal. Time passing on the outside, while almost no time passed on the inside. Cole had resisted it for years. It felt too close to giving up. Too close to simply waiting for death instead of doing something with the time. But by year 300, he had read every piece of material in the database twice. He had memorized the layout of all 200 ships down to individual bolts. He had run every maintenance check thousands of times. There was nothing left to learn inside the vault. There was nothing left to discover. The job now was simply to maintain, and the machines could handle most of that on their own. He authorized his first long sleep cycle in the spring of year 312. He set it for 10 years. He woke up and it felt like a long weekend. The years blurred. After that, not in a sad way, just in the way that time blurs when the days all look the same and you have made peace with that. He would sleep for a decade, wake up, run his checks, make his repairs, update his log, and sleep again. The ships stayed. Perfect. The systems held. Everything he had been asked to maintain, he maintained. But the silence changed as the centuries passed. In the early years it had been painful, a heavy, pressing thing that sat on his chest. In the middle years it became familiar, something he carried the way you carry an old scar, aware of it but not controlled by it. In the later years it became something else entirely, something he did not have a word for. It was not peace. It was not acceptance. It was something quieter than both of those things. Something that only comes to a person who has waited so long that waiting is no longer something they are doing. It is simply something they are. Cole had become the waiting itself. Then, in year 5000, something knocked on the door. Not gently. Cole came out of a sleep cycle in under 4 seconds. Faster than any alarm, faster than conscious thought. The vault's sensors were screaming. Something was outside the door, something large. Something that was hitting the metal with a force that sent vibrations through 3 miles of solid rock and up through the floor of the vault and into the soles of his boots. He did not panic. He walked to the weapons console with the same steady steps he had used every day for 5,000 years. He powered up the defense systems, all of them, quietly, without rushing. He checked the external sensors. Whatever was outside was big and it was strong and it was hitting that door like it believed, given enough time, the door would eventually give. The door did not give. Cole stood by the weapons console for 6 weeks. He slept in a chair beside it. He ate his rations beside it. He watched the sensor readings every hour, waiting to see if whatever was out there would find another way in or simply grow tired and leave. On the 41st day, the hitting stopped. The sensors showed movement pulling away, retreating, going, back the way it came. Cole waited another 2 weeks to be certain. Then he walked back to his cot, sat down and wrote one line in his log. Year 5000, day 41. External contact, unknown entity. Attempted breach unsuccessful. Threat has withdrawn. Vault secure. He paused, then he added one more sentence. The only sentence in 8,000 years of logs that was not a technical observation. Whatever it was, it chose wisely. He closed the log. He went back to sleep. 3,000 years later, a small alien probe touched the outside of his door. And for the first time in all that silence, Darren Cole decided it was time to find out who had finally come. The door opened 3 inches. Not all the way. Not dramatically. Just 3 inches. Enough to let light spill out from inside the vault and cut into the black water like a thin blade. The alien crew standing outside in their pressure suits saw it happen and nobody moved. Nobody breathed. They had come down here in a small submersible, 4 of them, because Commander Reth had decided that sending another probe was no longer enough. Something was alive in that vault. Something had opened those locks from the inside. They needed eyes on it. Now they had eyes on it, and it was staring back at them. The figure standing behind that 3-inch gap was not what any of them had expected. Dr. Sale Vorn had studied human remains his entire career. Bones in glass, in cases, photographs in old databases, mannequins in museum reconstructions. He thought he knew what a human looked like. He thought he was prepared. He was not prepared for this. The man in the gap was not a skeleton. He was not a ghost. He was not a recording or a machine wearing a human shape. He was simply a man, solid, still, and completely real, standing in the doorway of a vault that had been sealed for 8,000 years, looking at 4 aliens in pressure suits the way a person looks at something unexpected that has arrived slightly later than it should have. He looked tired, not weak, not broken, the way old mountains look tired, like something that has been standing for so long that tiredness has simply become part of its shape. He looked at them for a long moment. Then he said, in a voice that was low and rough from long disuse, 3 words. "Who sent you?" Vorn's earpiece crackled. The translation came back instantly. Old Standard Human, 7,000 years extinct, cross-referenced against the Council's dead language archive. He opened his mouth and discovered that he had absolutely no idea what to say. He tried 17 languages before the man held up one hand. "I understand you," Cole said. His voice was getting steadier now, like an engine warming up after a long cold rest. "My systems updated the translation database while I slept. All major galactic languages. Current as of..." He paused, glanced back at something inside the vault. "Approximately 40 years ago, give or take." Vorn blinked. "You learned our languages? While you were asleep?" "I had the machines do it," Cole said. "I had a lot of spare processing capacity." There was a silence. One of the soldiers behind Vorn put her hand slowly toward her weapon. Cole's eyes moved to her hand. She stopped moving. He did not say anything about it. He looked back at Vorn. "I need to ask you something first," Cole said. "Before anything else." Vorn nodded. Cole was quiet for a moment. He was looking at Vorn the way a person looks at someone when they already know the answer to the question they are about to ask and are simply deciding whether they are ready to hear it out loud. "Is Earth still standing?" he said. Vorn opened his mouth, closed it. He thought about how to phrase the answer carefully, diplomatically, in a way that would soften the weight of it. He thought about it for 2 full seconds. Cole read his face. "Okay," Cole said, quietly. The word carried everything, all 8,000 years of waiting, all those monthly reports into a dead radio, all those mornings when he woke up knowing, and simply chose not to say it. One word holding the weight of a world that was gone. "Okay." He stepped back from the door and opened it wider. "Come in," he said. The vault was enormous. That was the first thing Vorn noticed. He had expected a room, a large room maybe, a bunker, something a single person could reasonably live in. What he walked into was not a room. It was a world. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into dark. The floor stretched forward so far that the far wall was not visible. The air was cold and dry and smelled like metal and machine oil and something older than either of those things. And the lights, long rows of them running down the walls and across the ceiling, illuminated row after row after row of warships, sitting in the dark like sleeping giants. Vorn stopped walking. He counted. He lost count. He started again. Behind him he heard the medic, a young woman named Osa, exhale slowly through her teeth. Cole walked ahead of them without looking back. He moved through the vault the way a person moves through their own house, without thinking about it, without looking at the floor, turning at corners he knew were coming before he reached them. He had walked these corridors thousands of times. He knew every echo and every shadow. He stopped at a small area near the entrance, a cot, a table, a terminal, a single lamp, the place where he had lived for 8,000 years. It looked like the inside of a very old, very clean military cell. Neat, minimal, everything in its exact right place. Osa moved toward him with her medical scanner before anyone could stop her. Cole glanced at the device and then at her face, and something in his expression, not quite amusement, not quite sadness, settled briefly and was gone. "Go ahead," he said. She ran the scan. The results came back in 10 seconds. She read them again, looked up at him. "Your cellular age reads as 38 years old," she said carefully. "I am 38 years old," Cole said. "You have been in this vault for 8,000 years. Yes. And you are 38 years old. The machines preserved me." He said it simply, without pride or drama, like he was explaining how a refrigerator worked. They were built to do that. They did their job. Osa looked back at her scanner. Her hands were not entirely steady. "Your bone density is beyond any recorded species. Your muscle response is—" She trailed off. "Is what?" Vorn asked. She turned the scanner screen toward him. There was a single word where the measurement should have been. "Error." "The scanner cannot measure his reaction time," Osa said quietly. "It is not fast enough." Cole did not comment on this. He sat down at his table, the same table he had sat at every day for 8,000 years, and folded his hands and looked at Vorn. "I have questions," he said. "About what happened, about what is out there now, about who is in charge of what." He paused. "But first I imagine you have questions too. So ask." Vorn had approximately 400 questions. He opened his mouth to start with the most important one, the one Commander Reth was practically shouting into his earpiece. But before he could speak, Cole stood up again. He walked to a wall panel 12 feet away and pressed his hand flat against it. The vault shook, not violently, just a deep, low tremor, like the building clearing its throat. And then the lights came on, all of them, thousands of them, running, in long lines into the far darkness, illuminating ship after ship after ship, stretching so far back that the last rows were just faint shapes in the distance. The 4 aliens stood in silence and looked at what had been hidden beneath the ocean floor for 8,000 years. Reth's voice came through Vorn's earpiece, tight and controlled, but only just. "Dr. Vorn," she said, "what exactly is in there?" Vorn looked at 200 warships that belonged to a species the galaxy had declared extinct. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Commander," he said, "it is not one weapon." He turned slowly, taking in the full impossible length of the vault. "It is a fleet. Above them, 3 miles of cold, dark ocean pressed down on the secret that had been waiting beneath it for 8,000 years." And in the silence that followed Vorn's words, Darren Cole watched the faces of the first living beings he had seen in 8 millennia. And for the first time in a very long time, he allowed himself one small, quiet thought. Someone had finally come. Now the real work could begin. News travels fast when it is impossible. Commander Reth filed her report to the Galactic Council at 300 hours ship time. She kept it factual, no extra words, no drama, just the facts in the order they happened. The alarm, the probe, the vault, the man, the fleet. She attached the medical scan results, the ship inventory readings, and 40 minutes of unedited video footage from Vorn's helmet camera. She marked it Priority 1 and sent it. By Euro 600, The council's emergency line had received the report. By 700, every senior member of the council had been woken up. By 800, 14 governments across the galaxy were arguing about who owned the fleet. Cole sat at his table and listened to all of it. Vorn had given him access to the newsfeed, a live stream of galactic broadcasts, debates, official statements, and the kind of loud political shouting that apparently had not changed much in 8,000 years. Cole listened without expression. He ate a ration bar slowly, chewing each bite the way a man eats when he is thinking about something else. He had not had real food in months. The minimal mode cycles reduced his body's needs to almost nothing, and ration bars were not exactly real food anyway. But he ate it because it was there and because sitting still and eating gave him something to do with his hands while his mind worked through everything he was hearing. The arguments were, in his opinion, remarkable in how completely they missed the point. 14 governments, 14 sets of lawyers and ambassadors and military advisors, all talking about ownership and jurisdiction and territorial rights and historical salvage law. Not one of them was talking about the man who had spent 8,000 years alone in the dark keeping the fleet operational. Not one of them mentioned that the ships existed in perfect condition because a single human soldier had maintained them by hand, alone, without relief, without orders, without any reasonable expectation that anyone would ever come. Cole finished his ration bar. He folded the wrapper neatly and set it on the corner of the table. Then he picked up the news archive Vorn had loaded onto the terminal. 8,000 years of galactic history, compressed into a searchable database, and began to read. He read for 11 hours without stopping. He did not read about politics or economics or cultural movements. He read about wars. He read about which civilizations had risen and which had fallen. He read about the Vrath. What he found did not surprise him, but it settled something in him, something cold and quiet, that had been waiting to settle for a very long time. The Vrath had not stood still in 8,000 years. The empire that had destroyed Earth was now the largest single political power in the known galaxy. 47 systems under direct control, another 30 under economic influence. A military force that no single civilization could challenge directly. They were not the same scrappy, aggressive species that had burned humanity's colonies all those centuries ago. They were old now, established. They wore their power the way old empires always do, quietly with the confidence of something that has not been seriously challenged in so long that it has forgotten what a real challenge feels like. Their official, historical record listed humanity as extinct, case closed. Chapter ended. One small footnote in the long story of galactic civilization, a species that had shown early promise, expanded too quickly, and been removed before it could become a problem. The Vrath historians had written about it with the tone of people describing something mildly unfortunate that had happened a long time ago to someone they had never met. Cole read that footnote 3 times. Then he closed the archive and sat in the quiet of his vault and thought for a long time. Vorn found him there 2 hours later. The young archaeologist had barely slept. His mind was still running at full speed, turning over everything he had seen and heard since the vault door opened. He sat down across from Cole carefully, like someone sitting near a fire that might be larger than it looks. "The council is still arguing," Vorn said. Cole nodded. He already knew. 17 legal teams have submitted ownership claims. 3 governments are calling for a military escort to be placed around the vault. 2 are calling for it to be resealed. Vorn paused. "One is calling for you to be placed in protective custody." Cole looked at him. "Protective custody," Cole said. "They're words," Vorn said quickly. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then something moved across his face, not quite a smile. Something smaller and drier than that. "Tell the council," he said, "that I appreciate their concern for my well-being." He stood up and walked to the vault's main sensor array, a wide panel on the wall that he had personally repaired 912 times over the centuries. He pulled up the long-range scan. He had been checking it every hour since the vault door opened. Habit. 8,000 years of checking sensors did not stop just because guests had arrived. The scan showed something new. 3 contacts, moving fast, coming from the direction of Wrath space, cutting through the outer edge of the Sol system at a speed that was not consistent with a survey mission or a diplomatic approach. It was consistent with something else entirely. Cole looked at the contacts for a long time. Behind him, the sensor panel chimed softly. Vorn turned to look at it, and the color left his face. "Are those Wrath warships?" Cole said. "3 of them." He said it the way a person says something they expected to hear eventually. "They must have picked up the Council's report." Vorn stood up fast. "We need to contact Wrath. We need to—" "Sit down," Cole said. His voice was not loud. It was not hard. It was simply the voice of a man who had been in charge of something for 8,000 years and had not yet handed that responsibility to anyone else. Vorn sat down. Cole turned back to the sensor panel. He watched the 3 contacts moving, steadily closer. His expression did not change. He pulled up the location file for each one: class, armament, crew capacity, estimated arrival time. He read through the data the way a man reads a menu. Familiar. Unhurried. Then he did something that Vorn would later describe in his report as the single most unsettling thing he witnessed during the entire mission. Cole smiled. Not a big smile, not a warm one. Just a small, quiet pull at the corner of his mouth. The kind of expression that appears on a person's face when something they have been waiting for has finally arrived. He turned away from the sensor panel and walked toward the nearest warship, the one closest to the launch bay, the one he had always kept in the best condition, the one he had spent more hours on than any other. He climbed the access steps without hurrying. He sat down in the command seat and ran his hands across the console the way a musician runs their hands across an instrument they have not played in a while but have never forgotten. Everything came online. Every light, every screen, every system, weapons, engines, shields, navigation, responding instantly, perfectly, like 8,000 years had been nothing at all. Vorn appeared at the bottom of the steps, staring up at him. "Cole," he said carefully. "What are you doing?" Cole looked at the screen in front of him. 3 Wrath warships moving closer. The same empire that had burned Earth. The same empire that had declared his species extinct and written them off as a footnote. Coming now to claim the one thing humanity had left behind. The one thing he had given 8,000 years of his life to protect. He looked at Vorn. "Getting ready," he said simply. 3 miles above them, the Atlantic Ocean sat still and heavy and cold, completely unaware that beneath its floor the most dangerous thing in the known galaxy had just powered up its engines for the first time in 8,000 years. The Wrath ships kept moving. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Admiral Grun had never lost a battle. That was not modesty or exaggeration. It was simply a fact that everyone in the Wrath military knew, and most of them resented slightly. 31 engagements over a 40-year career. 31 victories. He was the kind of commander who walked into a room and made the room feel smaller. Not because he was physically large, but because he carried himself like a man who had already decided how everything was going to end and was simply waiting for reality to catch up to his conclusion. He had been given this assignment personally by the Wrath High Command. The order was simple. A human vault had been discovered beneath the Atlantic Ocean on the dead planet Earth. Inside the vault was a fleet of old human warships. The fleet was to be seized immediately, before the Galactic Council could establish legal protection over it. The operation was expected to take less than 6 hours. There was no human military force in the system. There was no credible threat. It was, in the opinion of Wrath High Command, barely worth sending 3 warships for. They sent 3 anyway because Grun liked to be thorough. His fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system at precisely 1400 hours. The 3 ships formed a clean triangle formation. Textbook approach, professional and unhurried. Grun stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the small blue-gray planet on his screen and felt nothing in particular. Earth. He had read about it in history files. The homeworld of a species that no longer existed. A dead planet with a dead ocean sitting on top of a fleet that was about to belong to the Vrath. He sent a standard demand to the surface and waited for the silence that usually followed. He did not get silence. The response came back in 11 seconds, audio only, no visual, one voice, low, unhurried, clear as cold water. This is Sergeant Major Darren Cole, Earth Deep Guard, serial number 77 Alpha Red 4. This fleet is human military property, and this planet is human territory. You have 10 minutes to reverse your heading and leave this system. Grun stared at the communication panel. His tactical officer looked at him. His second-in-command looked at him. Grun looked at the panel for 3 more seconds. Then he laughed. It was a genuine laugh, surprised and almost appreciative, the way a person laughs when something unexpected turns out to be funny rather than threatening. His crew laughed too. The tension on the bridge dissolved into noise and shaking heads. One man, one voice. 10 minutes. Grun composed his reply carefully, the way a professional composes a reply to something that does not deserve a long answer. He sent back one word. No. The 10 minutes passed. Grun's fleet continued moving forward. The planet grew, larger on the screen. The ocean was visible now, gray and flat and enormous. Grun ordered the lead ship to begin scanning for vault entry points. He ordered the second ship to establish a perimeter. He ordered his own ship to hold position. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Then the ocean began to boil. It started at the edges. Small at first, a disturbance on the surface like something moving fast beneath the water, then larger. Then the entire surface of a 40-mile stretch of the Atlantic began to churn and foam and rise as 200 launch tubes opened simultaneously in the ocean floor 3 miles below, and the pressure of 200 ships moving upward at full thrust hit the water all at once. The Vrath sensors went berserk. 200 contacts appeared on Grun's screen in the space of 4 seconds. 200. Not 2. Not 20. 200 warships rising out of the ocean like something the planet itself was throwing upward with both hands, breaking the surface in a wall of white water and noise that was visible from space, trailing rivers of the Atlantic behind them as they climbed into the sky. Grun watched his screen. His tactical officer was saying something. His second-in-command was saying something. The bridge was full of voices and none of them were reaching him because his entire mind was occupied with one simple fact that kept presenting itself to him with quiet insistence. These ships were old. 8,000 years old, and they were faster than anything he had ever seen. The Vrath military doctrine had a procedure for unexpected contact with a superior force. The procedure was clear, practiced, and deeply unglamorous. It was called emergency withdrawal. Every Vrath officer knew it. Nobody liked to use it. It meant turning your ships around as fast as physically possible and leaving in the direction you came from at maximum speed. Grun gave the order. His voice was completely steady. He was, above everything else, a professional. His 3 ships turned. His 3 ships ran. It did not help 2 of them. Cole sat in the command seat of the flagship warship and watched the Vrath formation break apart on his screen. He felt the ship moving beneath him, the engines running for the first time in 8,000 years, vibrating through the seat and up through his hands on the console, and the feeling was so familiar and so strange all at once that for a moment he simply sat with it, let it move through him. 8,000 years of stillness ending in this. In motion, in noise, in the smell of engines burning hot and the sound of weapon systems cycling up and the sight of 200 ships moving through. Open space in perfect formation because he had spent 8,000 years making sure they could. He targeted the 2 trailing Vrath ships with the precision of a man who had run this exact drill in his head approximately 11,000 times. The engagement lasted 4 minutes. 2 Vrath ships did not come out of it. The third, Grun's flagship, was fast enough and lucky enough to make it to jump distance with its hull intact and its engines barely holding together. Cole watched it go. He had the targeting solution. He could have ended the jump before it began. He held his hand above the firing control for exactly 3 seconds. Then he pulled it back. Vorn's voice came through the comm from the submersible, still sitting on the ocean floor. He had watched the entire engagement on the vault's external cameras. 200 ships rising out of the water, the battle above, the retreat. His voice was not entirely steady. Cole. Why did you let the third
Ship go?
Cole looked at the empty space where Grun's flagship had been. Outside the viewport, the Atlantic was settling back down, slowly, heavily, like a body returning to sleep after a long dream. The water that had been thrown upward was falling, back in long silver curtains. The sky was clear. The system was quiet. He thought about 8,000 years of silence. He thought about 14 destroyed colonies. He thought about a footnote in a history book. He thought about the Wrath Council sitting in their chamber right now, receiving a damage report from a flagship that had limped home with its tail between its legs, trying to understand what had just happened to 3 of their finest warships in the system of a species they had declared extinct. He thought about what that council needed to hear next. "I need them to deliver a message," he said. Vorn waited. Cole leaned back in the command seat and looked at the stars through the viewport, the same stars he had last seen 8,000 years ago, through a viewport that no longer existed, on a world that no longer existed in the way it once had. They looked the same. Stars always look the same. "Tell them," he said, "that Earth is not a dead planet. It never was." He paused. "Just long enough. And tell them that I am coming to have a conversation about what happened here, a proper one, and I would appreciate it very much if the full council was present when I arrive." Another pause. "Tell them also," Cole added quietly, "that I have 200 ships and nowhere else to be. I am not in a hurry, but I would prefer sooner." The comm was silent for a moment. Then Vorn said very carefully, "And if they say no?" Cole looked at his hands on the console. The same hands that had sealed that door 8,000 years ago. The same hands that had maintained every ship in this fleet alone in the dark for 8 millennia. The same hands that had just ended 2 Wrath warships without raising his voice. "They won't," he said. In the silence of the Sol system, 200 human warships held formation above the ocean that had hidden them for 8,000 years. And somewhere in Wrath space, a damaged flagship was already transmitting the message that would make every member of the Galactic Council check their schedule and quietly clear the rest of their week. The soldier who was never relieved of his post was finally coming in from the cold, and he had things to say. The Galactic Council chamber was the most important room in the known galaxy. Built 4,000 years ago from white stone quarried on 7 different planets. One piece from each of the founding civilizations, fitted together so perfectly you could not see the joins. The ceiling was high and curved and covered in a map of known space, every star system marked in soft light. The seats arranged in a wide circle could hold 240 representatives. Every seat was filled today. That had not happened. In over 300 years, Cole arrived alone. He took one ship from the fleet, not the largest, not the most armed. A mid-size vessel, fast and clean, with no markings except the old Earth military seal carefully restored on the hull. He docked without an escort, declined the honor guard sent to meet him, and walked through the corridors of the most powerful political institution in the galaxy the way a man walks through a place he is not particularly impressed by. He was wearing his uniform, same design as 8,000 years ago, cleaned, pressed, every button in its correct position. He had spent an hour on it that morning. Old habits. The chamber doors were open when he arrived. Cole walked through without slowing and crossed to the center speaking floor and stood there and looked around at 240 representatives of civilizations that had been living their lives while he sat alone in the dark beneath the Atlantic Ocean. He was not angry. That was what struck everyone in the room most forcefully. Everyone who would later describe this moment for the rest of their lives. He was not angry. He did not carry himself like a man who had come to demand revenge. He stood on that dark stone floor, and his expression was simply calm, settled. The expression of a man who knows exactly what he is going to say and has known it for a very long time. Council chair. Vorek spoke first. Old, pale-eyed, careful with words. He welcomed Cole formally, acknowledged the extraordinary circumstances, expressed the council's collective admiration, used the word remarkable 4 times, spoke for 6 minutes with practiced ease. Cole listened to every word. When Vorek finished, Cole nodded once, then he spoke. He said 3 things. He did not raise his voice. He did not use complicated words or long sentences. He spoke plainly, directly, without decoration. The first, Earth belonged to humanity. Any civilization currently operating in the Sol system had 60 days to leave. All of them, completely, no exceptions. The second, every human colony destroyed by the Vrath, all 14, every name and every person and every piece of history, would be recovered from whatever records existed, compiled, verified, and preserved in a permanent public archive maintained by the Council forever. Not a footnote, a full record, their names spoken correctly, their histories told completely. The third, humanity would be relisted as an active species in every galactic database, every legal registry, every territorial map, and every political record. Not historical, not extinct, active, with immediate effect and full legal standing. He paused. Then he added 2 more words. These are not requests. The chamber was very quiet. Vorek looked at Cole for a long moment, reading his face the way experienced politicians read faces, looking for the performance behind the words, the gap between what someone says and what they actually mean. He found nothing. Cole's face was exactly what it appeared to be. A man saying what he meant. Nothing hidden, nothing to negotiate. Vorek leaned forward slightly. And if the council declines? He said. Cole looked at him steadily. I waited 8,000 years to say those 3 things, he said. I am not tired. I have 200 warships and nowhere else to be. What I will do if the council declines is wait some more. He paused. I am very, very good at waiting. Every civilization in this room knows that now. He let that sit for 3 seconds. But I would prefer we handle this today, he said. I have a planet to get back to. The vote took 40 minutes. Cole stood at the center speaking floor for all 40 of them, and did not sit and did not move and did not speak. Patient, completely still, giving nothing away. When the vote came, it was not close. Every term accepted. All 3. Fully, formally, permanently. The council chair read the results in a steady voice, and they became law in the time it takes to say them out loud. Cole nodded once, turned, walked out. Vorn and Reth were waiting in the corridor. Vorn had been pacing. Reth had been standing very still with her arms crossed, which was how she stood when she was trying not to pace. Vorn lasted 11 seconds. How did it go? Fine, Cole said, still walking. They accepted everything? Yes. All 3 terms? Yes. Vorn looked at Reth. Reth looked at the ceiling. What happens now? Vorn asked. Cole stopped at a long curved viewport looking out into open space. The Sol system was barely visible at this distance, Earth too far to see with the naked eye. But Cole looked in the right direction anyway, and stood there for a moment. A man who had not seen his home from the outside in 8,000 years, looking toward it from a corridor window in a station he had never been in before, wearing a uniform from a world everyone had agreed was gone. He reached into his pocket and took out something small, a piece of metal, dark, rough-edged. A fragment of debris from the ocean floor outside the vault picked up before he left, a piece of the old world. He turned it over once in his hand, then he set it down on the windowsill carefully, deliberately, the way you set something down when you are not throwing it away but you are not carrying it anymore either. The way you set down something that belonged to what was, and not to what comes next. He straightened up. I am going home, he said. I have a great deal of work to do. He started walking again, steady, unhurried. Reth watched him go. Do you think he is all right? Vorn asked quietly. Reth thought about it. She thought about the vault. 8,000 years of four-word reports sent into a dead radio. 6 weeks standing by a weapons console because something knocked on his door. The expression on his face. When the Vrath ships came, not fear, not rage, just readiness. The readiness of something that has been ready for so long it has simply become what it is. I think, she said, that he has always been all right. I think that is the most remarkable thing about him. Cole flew back to Earth alone. He landed on the shore of the Atlantic, a mile from the vault entrance. He stepped out into air that was cold and smelled like salt and old rain and something he had no word for. The smell of a place that had been waiting as long as he had. He stood there, for a while, just long enough. Then he turned away from the water and walked inland, broken land, overgrown and silent. 8,000 years of weather and nobody home. It would take a great deal of work. It would take patience most people did not have. Cole had patience. He had been practicing for 8,000 years. He walked, steady, unhurried, heading into the wreckage of the old world with the quiet certainty of a man who has all the time he needs and knows exactly where to begin. He had a planet to rebuild. It was time to get started, and somewhere in the Galactic Council's newly updated records, in the species registry that had listed humanity as extinct for 8 millennia, one small change had been made. The status column now read, active, and in the notes field beneath it, someone had typed 4 words, do not count them out.